Hey folks, Professor Gray here, ready to talk to you about the new calculator commands for one sample hypothesis tests in statistics. Alright, to get to these commands, it doesn't matter what version of a TI calculator you have, you can find them in Stat, use the right arrow to go over to the Test menu, and scroll down. Be sure that if you're using a test for a hypothesis test, that you do select a test, not an interval. Well, the first one is a one prop z-test. All right, I go to it. It's number 5 on both versions and press enter. P sub 0 is the proportion in your hypothesis. You get that when you set up the problem. I'm just going to make up some numbers to just show you how they go in. All right, let's say 0.45. Again, it's the same on both versions of the calculator. X is how often something occurred within your sample. N is the sample size. And then when you get to the next to last line, you'll have to determine which tail or tails you're using for the hypothesis test. So match up the inequality with whatever inequality is in H sub 1 or your alternative hypothesis. Let's go with greater than, just for an example. When I go over to the greater than, I have to press enter and then it will stay highlighted. Then I can go down to calculate and press enter again, and I'll get all kinds of great information. The z-score is the test statistic. Occasionally homework asks for that. All right, the p-value is right underneath it. That's the probability of your sample data occurring the way it did if H sub 0, the null, is true. If you're going to compare to alpha, that is the number that you're interested in. In their case, this time it was 0.5327. All right, works the same way on both versions of the calculator as I mentioned. The next one is under Stat Test, and it is Z-Test. It's very top. All right, in a z-test, that's a hypothesis test for a mean. If you know the standard deviation of the population, you get a choice. You can use data or stats. Let's do the stats part first. I go over to stats, hit enter, and now I'm going to fill in the blanks. These are if you have summary statistics. So again, I'm just going to make up some numbers off the top of my head. Hopefully the numbers will work out okay. If they don't, no big deal. And when I go down to calculate, again, here is the test statistic. That's the z-score. The p-value is right underneath that. If you're going to compare to alpha, that's the number you want. Works the exact same way on a TI-84 plus silver. All right, if I'm doing a z-test and I have a list of numbers, then instead for the input I select data, press enter. Now I've already put in some numbers before. Of course, to do that you would go to stat and enter and fill in your list. Then once you've done that, go to stat, test, and z-test. Make sure data is selected and start filling in your numbers. Again, I'm just going to make these up. Be sure to tell the calculator which list you're using. In my case, I have list 1. The frequency is 1 because all my numbers just appear as they are in the list. Select your, again, the tail for the hypothesis and hit calculate. The z-score is in its usual spot. The p-value is right underneath. Let's do one more. Stat test, and number 2 is t-test. All right, the t-test also has data or stats. Let's do the stats one first. I'm just going to fill in some numbers. And calculate at the very bottom, and again you get your t-score. That's the critical, or excuse me, not critical, but that's the test statistic that you'll compare to the critical values. The p-value is right underneath. This one has scientific notation, so be sure to pay attention to that. The e negative 16 means times 10 to the negative 16th power. All right, back to the t-test. If we're doing a list, then be sure to put your list in first, then select data, and fill in your hypothesized mean, that's mu sub 0. The list name, frequency is 1. Calculate, and the calculator will do the rest. T-score is the test statistic, p-value is underneath. All right, that's how to do one sample hypothesis test in a TI calculator.